The scenery was beautiful to say the very least. I was with my girlfriend on a hike. It was our favorite season, the fall. It was about 60 degrees out, it was early November, and there was a slight smell of smoke, probably coming from a campfire. Winter was on its way, and all of the leaves were yellow and orange in the trees or on the ground, painting the landscape with a vibrant color of fall. It was a Thursday, around lunchtime, and by some miracle my company always gave November 2nd and 3rd off. My girlfriend and I took this chance to drive out to the walls of Jericho in Alabama. This had been one of my favorite camping spots to camp when I was a young member of the Boy Scouts because of its isolation. When you go deeper into the park, you didn't even have cell phone service, which almost forced you to enjoy nature around you. We were about 10 minutes into the hike when my girlfriend stopped walking behind me and grabbed my hoodie, lightly tugging. In reaction, I stopped too. She pointed towards the forest and whispered to me, "I just saw someone behind that tree." She pointed to a tree about 100 feet away. I figured she was just seeing things or someone was taking a piss, but I wanted to make her feel better. I put down my bag and I began walking towards the tree. "Hello? Is anybody there?" I yelled. There was no response, so I didn't expect to see anybody. I walked up to the tree and I circled around it. Nobody was there. There weren't even leaves disturbed on the ground. I figured she'd just been seeing things and I yelled back to her, "It was probably just a squirrel." She laughed and rolled her eyes, and I went back over to her. We continued hiking. Things were normal for about another hour and a half or so. We were almost to our campsite when I heard some leaves rustling up ahead. And from behind the tree, off in the woods, I saw someone peer out from behind a tree. It was a really pale face. It almost looked like a kid in white sheets dressed up as a ghost peering from behind a tree. I wanted to chalk it up to a bunch of Boy Scouts playing a prank, but this kid was far from where we started, and I didn't really know what to make of it. My girlfriend saw him too, and actually freaked out a bit. Again, I put down my bag and I approached the tree, more cautiously this time. The figure ducked back behind the tree when I got close, and when I got there, it was gone. This was really rubbing me the wrong way this time. We were obviously being followed, and we were both uncomfortable. When I got back to my girlfriend, I decided we'd enjoyed our hiking enough, and that we should cut our losses and go home before anything gets creepier. Almost the entire way back to the car, we felt fine. It had been about another hour and a half, and we hadn't seen anybody. I was even wondering if we shouldn't have turned around because things seemed overwhelmingly normal. We'd even seen a couple of other campers, and we warned them about what we'd seen, but they laughed it off and said it was probably just someone playing a prank. Then, when we were almost back to the car, I heard another rustle, followed by the typical face popping from behind a tree. "Forget this," I said, throwing down my bag one more time and actually running towards the tree this time. I was going to catch whoever it was. Shortly before I got to the tree, though, I heard a slight thud of something being dropped onto the leaves ahead. When I popped around the tree though, chills went down my spine. There was only one thing there, and it wasn't a person. It was a mask. A white round mask with nothing but 2 eye holes and not even a string on the back holding it together. I looked all around me and even listened really hard, but there was nothing, not a person to be seen or heard in any direction. My girlfriend and I packed up the car and went home. We've been back to the walls of Jericho since then, and nothing strange has happened, but this experience scared us both. We've both always watched our backs ever since then. October is one of my favorite months. This is in large part because the weather gets milder, but mostly because I absolutely love Halloween. I love how it's the first sign of festivity leading up to Thanksgiving and Christmas. At least in my mind, that's what it is. When I was growing up, my next door neighbors always went all out for Halloween. They always put out their extravagant decorations in mid-October. It was a sight to see. They had a small walkway leading up to their door. On both sides of it, they'd placed mannequins of otherworldly creatures in chairs holding out their hands. On Halloween in particular, they'd placed pretty good candy in those creatures' hands for children who dared to get close enough. The rest of the yard was littered with fake bones, lights that would flicker on and off, and those fake graves with mechatronic hands that stuck out of them and wiggled. It was definitely a novelty living next door to them. This particular year I'm talking about, it was 2002. I was 9 years old at the time, and with my wild imagination, I loved to think that fake ghosts, goblins, and ghouls they put in their yard might have been real. Most kids would have been scared by this, but I was intrigued by the idea of a wondrous world where there were strange and spooky creatures. I can't tell you why, that's just the way I was though. I was friends with the neighbor's son as well. We were about the same age. During this time of the year, when it started to get dark earlier, we'd always grab all of the kids in our street and we'd try and play flashlight tag. It was one of our favorite pastimes, and our parents didn't mind because it got us out of the house and off of the video games. As usual, I headed over to get the neighbor's son, who was named Anthony, and I remember vividly a rank smell when I walked into his yard, but I was a kid so I brushed it off as being nothing or thinking I stepped in dog crap. I got Anthony and we rounded up the kids and began to play. Everything went normal for about 2 hours. It was 8:30 p.m. and we were starting the 4th game and probably the final game of flashlight tag. I was it. In other words, I was the one with the flashlight trying to catch people. I hated that role. I always preferred to be the one that was running away. I was counting down from 30, and when I got to 16, I heard a scream. I stopped counting and I made a dash in the direction of the scream. When I got there, I saw it was Anthony. He was standing in his yard and pointing at one of the mannequins that had a towel over it as if it were a ghost. It's not a mannequin," he yelled. "It grabbed at me when I hid underneath it." He was frantic. When I went up to it, it didn't budge though. But then, I made a horrible mistake. I poked at it. As soon as I touched it, it was soft, warm, and obviously not a mannequin. It bolted up and grabbed me from under the sheet covering it, wrestling me to the ground. Anthony ran inside and got his parents, and his dad came running outside towards me while his mom called 911 in the background. Anthony's dad grabbed the man and socked him straight in the head, knocking him over and leaving him motionless. He then grabbed the man's arms, turned him over, and pinned him down. A few minutes later, the police arrived and took the man away. A few weeks later, we found out that it was one of our neighbors that was in the chair. He was previously a convicted sex offender, but we didn't even have a clue about it until then. I don't really know what the moral to this story would be if I had to have one, but I know for sure if I put a mannequin in my yard when I have a house, none of them will be dressed up like ghosts.
I always loved the fall. It was my favourite season, notably because it's one of the best seasons for running. Going for a jog with the cool fall air on your back was a refreshing break from the hot summer. I could relax and enjoy the sport that time of year. Another thing I loved about the fall was that it began to get dark earlier. My favourite time of the day was to run right at the sunset into the dark. Running in the dark always helped me stay in my own head. Anyways, it was mid-October, about 7 p.m, and I was going out for a 5-mile jog as usual. I started down a gravel path that I ran at pretty frequently. The pattering of my feet against the ground kicking up gravel was calming to listen to. I didn't bother with music. I loved hearing the calm sounds of nature this time of year mixed with that of my feet patting against the ground. Now, these runs were uneventful almost all the time. Occasionally I would get paranoid over the snap of a twig in the woods that bordered the path, or another runner would run by me and I'd be afraid he was following me. I always thought the worst, but nothing bad ever happened. Eventually I'd make it to the end of the path where there was a Shell gas station on a fairly low traffic road. Now, this might be a little too much information, but running always made me have to use the bathroom. So I'd stop there and take care of business, almost on schedule at the halfway point. Because of how often I frequented this gas station, not just on these runs but to fill up with gas at other times, the cashier Tom and I were decently well acquainted. As usual, I walked inside and thoughtlessly exclaimed, "What's up, Tom?" But then I noticed, Tom wasn't at the register. I took a look around and didn't see him, or any employees or customers for that matter. I yelled for him a few more times to no avail, and went to use the bathroom anyways. When I'd finished, I stepped outside, stretched, and looked around for him and yelled his name. I was starting to get concerned. It wasn't like Tom to just up and leave. I took a lap around the entire gas station, and there wasn't even a trace of anyone. Anyways, right as I was about to head back to my car and forget about this incident, from the woods behind the gas station I heard a hushed, "Hey! Hey kid!" This stopped me in my tracks. I turned towards the woods but backed away slowly, pulling out my phone and turning on the flashlight, only to see a large man with long hair hunched over between some trees. "Hey! Tom is back here with me." As he said that, a crazed smile crossed the man's face. I had enough of this. I ran from him back towards my gravel path as fast as I could and back to my car. When I got back to my car, I called the police. I drove to the gas station, only to find by the time I got there, the police and paramedics had already made it there. They had a man on a stretcher and they were loading him into an ambulance. Apparently they'd checked behind the station only to find Tom drugged up and stuffed in a bush. He'd been stuck with a tranquilizer or something and dragged behind the station by the man I saw. Luckily, my showing up scared off the man that did this to him. Needless to say, Tom found another job after this, and I stopped running on that path. I think we both knew it was in our best interest to avoid going back to that gas station. I'm just glad I showed up when I did, because otherwise who knows what might have happened to him.